evening. I'd like to call to order tonight's meeting of the ISD 191 Burnsville Egan Savage School Board. The date is May 14th, 2020, and the time is 6:30. I'd like to start by welcoming our audience. Thank you for joining us. Even remotely, our work continues, and we always appreciate knowing that our community is tuning in. So thank you. With that, Director Hume, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which I stand, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, we will start by approving tonight's agenda. I will take a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Director Schatz, second.
Second.
Seconded by Director Chester. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the agenda, please signify by Ms. Kenny, would you please call the roll?
Hume,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Alt,
Aye.
Holwiger,
Aye.
Chester,
Aye.
Schatz,
Aye.
Courier.
Aye.
And the motion carries. Thank you. First on our agenda tonight is Winter Activities Recognition, and I'd like to invite BHS Activities Director and Associate Principal Jay Lepper to share the accomplishments of these outstanding students. Typically, we have students attend our meetings so we can congratulate them in person. While we are not able to do so this spring, it's still important to us to recognize their achievement. Mr. Lepper, welcome, and thank you for joining us to share a little bit about these outstanding students.
Thank you, Chair Alt, Superintendent Battle, and members of the board. As always, we had some outstanding performances by our students in athletics and activities this past winter, and I'm happy to share those with you tonight. First of all, youth in government. Minnesota YMCA Youth in Government is a youth-led opportunity that allows young people to engage with the workings of government through experiential learning. It involves 2,500 middle school and high school students each year in a variety of programs. Burnsville High School students are able to join the local delegation, which is offered through the YMCA, and participate in events. This year, 11th grader Sophia Hemeny was elected to serve as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court at YIG 2021. She was also awarded the YMCA Servant Leadership Award for promptly stepping into an appointed official position in the Supreme Court on the first day of the YIG conference and coming more prepared than expected. 9th grader Ellie Hovde was elected to serve as the Speaker of Sibley House at YIG 2021, and Bianca Freeby was elected to serve as the Speaker of Humphrey House at YIG 2021. Senior Maddie Moore was selected to serve as President of Global Forum at the Model United Nations 2020, which was originally planned to take place in March. Congratulations to these BHS elected officers and their success in YIG this year. One Act Play. The Burnsville High School competition One Act Play won the Section 3 AA Championship at Simley High School on January 29th and advanced to the state tournament on February 7th at O'Shaughnessy Auditorium at the College of St. Catherine's in St. Paul. Directed by Amy Stead, the team performed The Insanity of Mary Gerard by Lainey Robertson. Student performers were Michaela Barsenis, Gavin Blix, Michael Gettle, Matthew McGuire, Emma Wawrinick, Sata Kanu, and Cecilia Johnson. Stage crew included Kiana Cully, Gabe Hubbard, Helen Wong, Richard Tamayo, Mason Teal, Jacob Holtzleiter, Maddie Moore, Casey Hennessy, and Campbell White. Makeup and hair crew included Aurora Anderson, Hannah Herman, and Eliza Lawrenson. Ms. Stead, the director, noted, "I could not be more proud of all the effort these students put into their work. Congratulations to Amy Stead and students on having such a successful season." BHS and Metcalfe Middle School Quiz Bowl teams. Burnsville High School Quiz Bowl team finished 6-0 to win the South Suburban Conference Quiz Bowl Championship on February 11th, which took place at Burnsville High School. This is the fourth time in the last 5 years that the team has been crowned South Suburban Conference champs. They qualified for the NAQT High School National Championship, which would have taken place over Memorial Day weekend in Atlanta. Burnsville juniors Joe Schatz and Wyatt Isaacson finished second and third, respectively, each with over 65 points per game. Senior Chance Persons was fifth with over 55 points per game, rounding out the medaling field. Sophomore Eric Gorton, the remaining member of the championship Burnsville team, placed 21st overall in scoring. In addition to the varsity tournament, there was a junior varsity tournament in which 20 teams participated, and most schools fielded at least one additional team. Burnsville C finished undefeated 5-0 to win the championship. Junior varsity team members included sophomores Emerson Drayton, Greta Neisel, and Carter Stewart, and freshman Paul Martineau. Metcalfe Middle School Quiz Bowl team also qualified for nationals. Team members include 8th graders Matt Trussell, Tim Trussell, Josh Trussell, Colin Boyum, Aiden Josephs, and Noah Leibniz. Congratulations to advisor Les Moffitt and the team for their continued success. Weightlifting. On March 7th, Burnsville High School's boys powerlifting team won the Minnesota State Powerlifting Championship, and the girls team was named runner-up. There were 4 individual state champions, 2 state runner-ups, and 2 third-place finishes. Burnsville lifters set 7 state records. Samuel Heino, who has 4 state records, Elietta Forn, who has 3 state records, Marshall Harrison, and Oscar Villatoro Romero were all named state champions for Burnsville. Runners-up were Bradley Brua and Brianna Bork. Max Zitnick and Casey Jensen finished 3rd place in state. Then at the Minnesota State Olympic Weightlifting Championships in Cannon Falls, 7 of the 9 lifters made the podium, and Burnsville took 3rd place in state. Chase Fongham, Elietta Forn, Kaylee Gant, Sadiq Baware, and Nathan Lee were runners-up. In 3rd place was Natalie Thorson and Dylan Fisher. Congratulations to the powerlifting and Olympic weightlifting teams, as well as coaches Justin Lerfold and Justin Decker. Robotics. 3 Burnsville robotics teams advanced to the Minnesota State Championship after competing at tournaments hosted by Burnsville Robotics at Burnsville High School on January 18th and 19th. The Wiring Warriors, a 5th-year team, and High Voltage, a rookie team, earned their spots at state by winning the Saturday event in an alliance with an Egan-based team. The Wiring Warriors won an award for their innovative design of a robot component, Collins Aerospace Innovative Award, while High Voltage took home an award for their programming, the Control Award sponsored by ARM Inc. 7th-year team, the Pride, won the Stratasys Award for incorporating 3D printing and computer-aided design in their robot, the Think Award for excellence in their engineering notebook, and the Inspire Award for overall excellence in their season performance, which advanced them to the state championship. The Pride Wiring Warriors and High Voltage joined 45 Minnesota teams who qualified at the FTC State Championship at the Washington Technology Magnet School in St. Paul on February 7th and 8th, 2020. The Pride team includes students Gerald Johnson, Katie Fritz, Livia Selby, Ryan Fors, Nathan Wilder, Ethan Jacobson, Sarah Leibniz, and Noah Leibniz. The Wiring Warriors include students Jacob Polenius, Eloisa Roscoe, Will Moe, Corvus Murphy, and Ashton Thompson. The High Voltage team includes Nala Stevenson, Ian Park, Owen Sapansky, Blake Hasse, and Joseph Ong. Congratulations to these teams and their incredible season. Chess. The Metcalfe chess team collected some well-deserved hardware at this year's Minnesota State Scholastic Chess Championship held March 7th and 8th in Bloomington. Bringing home the gold for the Metcalfe team were Harrison Stage, Joseph Santos, Soren Leafblad, and Mitchell Kellen. Individual tournament placement trophies were awarded to Harrison Stage 6th place, Mitchell Kellen 7th place, Soren Leafblad 10th place, Jake Shanebauer 12th place, Joseph Santos 14th place, Cash Primus 17th place, and David Santos 20th place. Nearly 250 players participated in the event. In addition, the Metcalfe A team was named Traveling League Champions. Outstanding players' league performances were by Mitchell Kellen, Owen Crick, Jake Shanebauer, J.J. Johnson, and Harrison Stage. Brian Ribnick, a retired District 191 math teacher, who was the first recipient of the District 191 Spirit of Excellence Award in 2016, has been the longtime chess coach at Metcalfe. He said that the team was committed from day one of practice in October to winning the state middle school chess title in their final season, and they certainly accomplished that goal. Congrats. Speech. Congratulations to sophomore Ellie Shellberg, who qualified for nationals in the humor category at the Minnesota State Speech Tournament in April. Ellie competed against 30 other schools in our district and was one of 3 individuals sent in her category to the National Speech and Debate Tournament, which is now online. The tournament would have been hosted in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and is a multi-day tournament starting on June 17th. To compete this year, she'll submit a video of her piece that will be judged live by qualified national judges. This is Ellie's second year competing in speech, and it's incredibly difficult to do what she's done, and we are proud that she is Burnsville's first ever national competitor, said speech team coach Catherine Ryder. In addition, sophomore Umith Azad was an original oratory finalist at the national qualifying tournament. Both students put in a tremendous amount of work and have a natural talent for public speaking. It's astounding what these students have accomplished as only sophomores, stated Ryder. And to the rest of the team, your work hasn't gone unnoticed, and we're proud of the culture and passion for speech you've cultivated. Congratulations to Ellie, Umith, as well as coaches Catherine Ryder and Derek Tano. Girls hockey. This year's girls hockey team won the Section 3AA championship. The team qualified for the state tournament after a dramatic section final win against Egan. This was Burnsville's first trip to the state tournament since 2014, which was also the last time the program had won a section game. Burnsville went into the state tournament with a 19-7-2 record. They faced top seed Edina in the Class AA state quarterfinals at the Xcel Energy Center in St. Paul on February 20th. Team members are Avery Sachek, Caitlin Procco, Hannah Benfer, Ali Erlov, Aubrey Nelvin, Zoe Dundon, Zoe Chadwick, Sammy Bolby, Kendra Distad, Katie Katzmarek, Olivia Carlson, Emily Howard, Gabby Gramacki, Megan Newts, Maddie Mazanek, Lauren Klein, Madison Krumholtz, Morgan Hansen, Emma Tilbury, Olivia Tilbury, and Maria Wyden. Head coach is Chris Lepper, and assistant coaches are Carissa Thompson, Aaron Goodell, and Randy Johnson. Student managers were Allison Coughlin and Lan Wells. Congratulations to Coach Lepper and the team on a phenomenal season. DECA. In spite of their season being cut short, Burnsville High School DECA is proud of the strides they made this year and the successes of the students who qualified for the International Career Development Conference, which was originally planned to take place in Nashville at the end of April. With nearly 2/3 of the students qualifying for state, this year's Burnsville chapter of DECA has been the most successful to date. More than 2,400 students competed at state, a record for Minnesota DECA, and Burnsville had 5 students qualify for finals. The following students qualified for DECA State, the largest number of students in the history of Burnsville High School. Ushmil Azad, Hannah Benfer, Montserrat Blanco Lopez, Bennett Oates, Lindsey Brown, Kirsten Buckner, Alexa Carnolo, Maddie Dahl, Savannah Drum, Bianca Freeby, Nathan Grenke, Becca Harder, Najib Hassan, Megan Holly, Sam Hino, Kevin Huang, Dane Hunerman, Megan Hopkins, Ellie Hovde, Emma Hovde, Sahim Ibrahim, Lucas Johnson, Grace Kaufman, Gavin Kellen, Reagan Kinnams, Charlie Kruger, Brisa Livu, Kent Livu, Isabella Lee, Christine Mina, Grace Milhopt, Matthew Wynn, Dot Wynn, Marshall Noring, Jacob Norton, Zoe Olson, Sophie Potter, Brianna Reuter, Jocelyn Reuter, Destiny Robinson, Ava Chauvine, Garrett Sauer, Anthony Tran, Daniel Vasquez, and Ariana Driscoll Churlin. The following students qualified for finals. Emma Hovde, who is a state officer and the first officer in Burnsville history, qualified in 2 events, Marketing Communications Role Play and Community Giving Project with Lucas Johnson. Lucas Johnson ranked in the top 8 for Business Services Marketing Role Play event and qualified for ICDC in a team event with Emma Hovde in the Community Giving Project. Matthew Wynn qualified in Business Finance Role Play event. Anthony Tran placed in the top 8 for food marketing role play event and qualified for Thrive Academy at ICDC. Marshall Noring placed in the top 12 for business services marketing role play event and qualified for Thrive Academy at ICDC. Each DECA student has contributed to this year's DECA program, and they have been wildly successful, said Megan Malone, DECA's advisor. I am impressed with the way these students represented Burnsville, from its membership involvement to the leadership of the officers. I couldn't be more proud of our chapter. Congratulations to DECA advisors Megan Malone and Michelle Carroll, and to DECA members on a fantastic season. HOSA. HOSA, or Future Health Professionals, formerly known as Health Occupation Students of America, is an international student organization recognized by the U.S. Department of Education and the Health Science Education Division of ACTE, whose mission is to empower HOSA, future health professionals, to become leaders in the global health community through education, collaboration, and experience. David Wilkins, a junior, was selected for the position of Vice President of Middle School Relations for the state of Minnesota HOSA. In the selection process, David made 2 virtual speeches, wrote 5 essays, provided several references, and had an interview. During his term of office in his role, David will be communicating with middle school HOSA groups throughout the state of Minnesota and helping schools to create new chapters at their sites. David states that his Burnsville High School teacher, Ann Warner Dempsey, first introduced him to HOSA while he was a student in healthcare core curriculum class, certified nursing assistant class, and the medical terminology class, which David says opened his eyes to the healthcare world and showed him what he is capable of through each new experience. Band and choir AllState. We had one student who made 2021 All-State Symphonic Band, Jacob Miller, trombone. We also had one student who is in a 2021 All-State Band alternate, Calvin York, flute. Burnsville High School also had students chosen for MMEA 2021 All-State Choir. Sophia Kemeny was placed in the 2021 All-State Soprano Alto Choir, and Haley Robinson was chosen as an alternate for the 2021 All-State Choir. MMEA's All-State, considered the top program of its kind across the nation, develops high school musicians and schools music programs. The All-State program supports secondary school music ensembles, MMEA members, and member students. Students in high school bands, choir, and orchestra audition for All-State spots in March. Judges listen to the students, evaluate them on their overall musicianship and technique. In mid-April, the MMEA All-State Committee chooses the final rosters. They consider scores and MMEA's placement policies. 565 students are selected then for the 7 All-State groups. All of the young musicians meet in February to rehearse and perform at Orchestra Hall as part of the MMEA Midwinter Clinic. And that concludes the winter activities recognition. Thank you again, Chair Alt, Superintendent Battle, and members of the board for allowing me to share the many great accomplishments of our students and staff.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lepper. Quite an accomplished group of students with a real variety of gifts and talents. Board members, I'll open it up for comments, questions. Seeing none. Thank you very much again, Mr. Lepper, for sharing our students' accomplishments. We are so proud and look forward to hearing back again about more accomplishments in the new school year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Next, I would like to invite Brian Gersich, Assistant Superintendent, and Principals Brad Robb, John Bonneville, Angie Pohl, and Erica Nesvig. We are going to receive a report about school closures and year-end celebrations. Welcome all.
Thank you, Chair Alt, Superintendent Battle, and Board of Directors. On behalf of the entire team, appreciate the opportunity here to present to you some of the updates and maybe some of the things that have been a bit more fluid as a part of our process for transitioning to new school boundaries. And as we talk about that, and we mention our new boundaries, it is a result of a lot of things that have already been, that have gone on this school year. When in the fall, our district deemed it was prudent for us to close 2 elementary schools and a middle school and further transition into new boundaries for our district as a result of those changes. And so again, as much of our focus this year has been on opening 8 new elementary schools and our 2 new middle schools with our focus. And I think you'll hear some of that as we come through. It's also about how are we working to transition families and staff into this new reality of the new boundaries. As we look at our presentation this evening, we'll start with a little bit of an overview of kind of our general grounding and process, which certainly is the result of a number of meetings, both with our leadership, but certainly among our principal groups themselves, as they did a lot of work throughout this process, both to develop the process and agreements, as well as talking about those boundary transitions activities. How did we work hard to make sure that we welcomed new families and staff into these new 8 elementaries and 2 middle schools as a part of these shifts? Then we'll talk a little bit about some of the activities that are going on for those sites that are closing. Again, we want to maintain that positive focus of all the opportunities that this is going to provide for our district, but there's also a need to focus on positive closure and celebrating shared history that has gone on at those sites for Sioux Trail, M.W. Savage, and for Metcalfe Middle School. And again, talk a little bit about some of the planning as well as some of the adjusting as a result of the reality of our current conditions and why we're here in a remote board meeting with a worldwide pandemic. Just as kind of a note is, we've seen this throughout our process, and from the beginning in the development of the guiding change framework and process, we did talk about putting things through the lens of our current reality, our desired results, and the means by which we are accepting to be able to get from one end to the other. Because we've gone through various iterations of this throughout different stages of this process, I didn't want to bring back the entire guiding change document, which can be a little daunting, but really just highlight some of the unique aspects of the current process as it came through our guiding change. And when we look through that, we're talking about many students will be attending new schools, and reiterating that it's not just students from sites that had been closed. We redrew all of our boundaries, utilizing an equity lens throughout this process, knowing that all of our sites were going to have some kind of change as a result of the work that had gone on over the course of the school year. Certainly, there's a lot of uncertainty, and that means there's a commitment to communication. Communication is key throughout this process as we make sure people have the information that we need. And certainly, while it feels like this has gone on a long time since last July, this still was a fairly aggressive timeline to get all the things done on top of the day in, day out things we have of running schools and school districts. So it was part of our reality, which means we had to call that out and name that so that we are committed to the fact that we're going to do this again with our desired results, equity and engagement throughout that process within our populations. Talk about developing new community pride in our new schools. And again, I think our principals are going to talk about that quite a bit. Providing answers to the community sooner than later. Again, it's that comes right on back to that commitment to communication. Unacceptable means certainly to not consider our timelines. And as we created this in the winter, still ahead of us were things like staffing and registration and kindergarten roundup and the other kinds of things. We needed to make sure as a team, we were planning things out, and we had multiple layers of timelines to ensure everything we were going to be working on. Certainly unacceptable to fail to consider the physical or the needs of our staff, and certainly to ignore the unique needs of our different schools. And you'll see some of that within our group as well. When we talk about our overall purpose statements, again, a theme already has been consistent communication and really the focus that we have as a team. And I appreciate the work of Erin Tinklenberg and the communications department that really helped us articulate kind of our purpose statements and the commitments that we had throughout this process. And the first was, we know that by consolidating to 8 elementaries and 2 middle schools, it was about efficiencies. We're looking at the positive. That's the underlying why. We know that if we can use our resources more efficiently, we have the ability to maintain better programming for our students. And as Dr. Werner said a number of times to our community groups, he likened it to smoke up the smokestack comparatively to programming for our students. We know we've got great programs that we want to protect. Adjusting boundaries will help address inequities. Again, moving away from sites that in our current reality are racially and socioeconomically identifiable or isolated sites, big variations, and the great work of that boundaries committee to make sure that we were developing new boundaries that were going to be equitable. A key point, not meant to be third by a lack of importance. It is a key point. No matter where our kids go to school, they're going to have teachers that love them, that care about them, playgrounds, libraries, and opportunities to learn. And I think hopefully that comes through some of our narratives today, that as our principals were in a few months back, able to give tours to families, to introduce them to staff. That's what they were experiencing, was some amazing people in our district. Regardless of where you go, we have amazing teachers, and that is a critical talking point that we have to continue to express to our families and to our community. Schools will work hard to build community. They've been working hard. And District 191 schools and programs will come out stronger as we are more efficient and take that comprehensive action that we knew that was important to do. What I've got, and I'll transition here to bring our principals forward. We have two of our elementary principals that I'm excited to have with us. John Bonneville, now Dr. John Bonneville, principal of Sky Oaks Elementary. Brad Robb from Ron. After Brad and John talk through a little bit about the elementary perspective of this process, Erica Nesvig will be joining us, as will Dr. Pohl, principals at Eagle Ridge and Nicollet Middle School, respectively. If I could have Brad and John join us at this time.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about our process as elementary schools to really make sure that we're welcoming our families all throughout our district to our schools. So as we became more aware and it was more imminent that two of our schools at the elementary level were going to close, it was important for us as principals to be very coordinated and work collaboratively to ensure that all of our families were getting some of the similar welcoming processes, and that we're very thorough in making sure that our families feel welcomed and have a good sense of what our schools are all about. This table that you see here is one of our working documents that we had. And we began these conversations all the way back in October as again, we might have anticipated something. And so it was important that we were well planned and that we thought through many different aspects. And there were things that we decided to do and things that we talked through to see if this was going to be the best for our families. But this document here is to show you how we coordinated all of our work together. And there's multiple things that we decided to follow through on, and that's on the next slide. So one of the things that was that really stood out is providing opportunities to build community, and building community between schools that might be closing, or also just families moving to different schools. And so you can see a list of different opportunities that we provided, whether that's having a joint PTO meeting with principals from other schools at, like for instance, Mohammed Salim, Principal William Byrne, and myself went over to Sioux Trail to join their PTO meeting. We would have scheduled weekly family tours. Once we began to know the students and families that would be within our new attendance boundaries, making phone calls to those families to welcome them, personal phone calls from the principals. We had a spring open house, and I want to tell you a brief story about that in a moment. And then we anticipated having like carnivals and some of those end of the year events that are really important to schools, and ensuring that our families all across our district are invited to those. We even did some coffee with the principals where, again, Mohammed Salim and myself went over to Sioux Trail and provided an opportunity for families to come and meet us and just get to know each other. There was no agenda. It was more of a, hey, here I am. I'm here for you. We want to make sure that this works really well. And then sending out messages through postcards. But one particular thing that we did was this open house, and just I'll share from my experience at Ron, is we created this open house that was to really highlight the great things about Ron with our current families and with our prospective new families, and making sure that our communities coming together in a way to learn about what happens at Ron Elementary, from the TV news studio to what is happening in 5th grade, for instance. And so we also had district administration come and make sure that our families were aware of some of the great pathways that will be coming to our elementary schools next year, as well as representatives from the middle schools to welcome our 5th grade families into the middle school, as we would have some of our Sioux Trail families who might be going into 6th grade next year. Last thing is we got some really positive feedback about that open house. And it's important that we get that message out. And that feedback was shared community-wide about just a really positive event there at Ron. And so we're really proud of the work that we did. Many staff members joined us for that night, and many of our current families, PTO families, really stepped up and made that night just a wonderful experience.
Great. And then as I take it here a little bit further with the elementary transition plan, as Brad shared, we met very regularly to make sure that we were kind of on the same page and what we were trying to accomplish as a group to make sure that was cohesive and consistent as possible. And out of that, we really promised each other that we were going to hold to that to make sure that this was a unified approach in making sure that we were welcoming all families, students, and in through this process. So that was pre-COVID. Then COVID comes, right? And now we have a different reality as we've kind of moved through the last couple of months here, and our plans have changed some. However, the essence of what we've been trying to accomplish in those connections with families, with our students, and that hasn't changed. So I'm going to share some examples of things that we're doing district-wide at each of our elementary sites that get at that consistency of message. However, are unique to each of the sites, and I think you'll see that it really is a positive experience and effort by all to make sure that we're making the best of this transition, and so that when we come into in the fall, we're in a really good position to continue on with that community building. So you can see here some of the things listed. One of the big things here is the open door pantry. We had that at a few of our sites before, but now that is expanded to a number of different sites, including Sky Oaks, Neal, and Sioux Trail. I know that Hidden Valley had done that before, and in our first event with that, we were able to deliver almost 8,000 pounds of food. So really meeting a community need and doing that in different parts of the district at the elementary sites. You also have staff parades and those opportunities to get out into the community. So right away, elementary is gifted at this. I'm going, so how can we make sure that we stay connected? And they always are ones that think outside the box, right? So you can see here some examples of Gideon Pond had done one just as this was happening. And obviously Ron Elementary, and I know there are others that are in the process of planning those events now, especially now that the governor has lifted the stay-at-home order. So those are unique. They're unique things within the community, and definitely pieces that we continue to plan and hold as we move in here to. Well, geez, there's not that many days left of school. Moving on, other pieces that we've done is in the beginning, the planning stages would be those summer connections and activities. What are those things that we'll be able to do that we weren't able to do necessarily to connect with families here at the end of the year? What might that look like? So right now, there are a number of things that are being planned in that stage. Byrne and Vista View, I know, have some things that they're thinking about, picnics or things in the park or some sort of activities where we can bring people together, obviously following the social distancing guides and those pieces. Curbside celebrations. So as we're doing the Chromebook collection and the materials delivery, what are those things that we can do, knowing that we already have families coming in? What are some things that we can do to make sure that we're celebrating that, they're being there, making those connections with communities? So I know that Vista View is planning something very special around that, but I know that also the other buildings are going to be doing things and making sure that we're connecting during those opportunities. Another big thing would be fifth grade send-off messages. This is a big deal And when I think about Sky Oaks in particular, this being my last year there, this was a really important thing to be able to do. So we've planned a video to our just specifically our fifth graders, making sure that they know that we're thinking about them, because it's an important step, and we want that to make sure that they feel supported and know that they're going to continue to be strong ambassadors moving in into their next phase of life. So those are also really unique things that are happening at our buildings. Fall open houses, obviously, you know, we did not have that opportunity with the carnivals to bring people in, but this really presents a great opportunity to really focus in and make sure that we have those open houses scheduled and planned and ready to go here this coming fall. And then, of course, beyond having these activities and engagement plans for our community and students, we also are being very mindful of staff and how those changes are happening. How are we welcoming people, our staff who are coming from buildings that are closing and transitioning? And what are those things that we're doing to make sure that they're feeling welcome into these new, our new buildings and what that's going to look like. So I know there's plans around how do we do that. Specifically, Gideon Pond is doing a one-to-one teacher bridge building Zoom. So utilizing technology and making sure that they're feeling connected, staff are feeling connected as they come into their new spaces, and really develop that new sense of community and vibrance in our current transition. And then, of course, one of the last pieces here that I'll share are videos that reach out to our students and families. So these are things that we've done occasionally over the last couple months here. And an example there that I shared is, you know, we miss you. Sky Oaks did a video right away at the beginning, and it really just reminds it reminds the students community and others that we're here. This isn't our first choice, but we're definitely going to be, we're doing the very best we can to make sure that we stay connected with our families and welcome them. So there's a lot that we've been able to stick with the planning before this was all before this happened. But as you can see, there's a lot that's happening beyond or now post-COVID. And that is ever evolving, but some really, really strong community efforts and making sure that we are keeping that sense of community strong here in Bridgeville.
So we'll switch gears to middle school. Good evening. We're very excited to share some exciting things happening at our middle schools during this time of transition. So our 3 middle schools have worked very closely together to plan for a smooth and positive transition for students and staff. We've really focused on merging our communities and building new middle school communities together. So you can see what we accomplished in January through March in this timeline. In January, a really important step that we took was deciding to implement WEB, which stands for Where Everybody Belongs. And WEB is a middle school transition program that empowers our 8th graders to be WEB leaders, who are positive role models and mentors that support our 6th graders with their transition throughout the school year. In February, coordinators were selected from each of the middle schools, and they, along with Erica and I, attended a training for WEB. We discussed how we could take what we were learning about WEB and use it to support not only our incoming 6th graders, but also our 7th and 8th graders that are making transitions to new middle schools. We are currently completing our recruitment of student leaders from each of the buildings, and we're going to ensure that we have 8th grade leaders that are coming from Metcalfe to Nicollet and from Nicollet to Eagle Ridge. In February, our counselors had a chance to visit each of the elementary schools and get kids excited for middle school, help them register for classes, and just get to answer kids' questions. They also helped our current middle school students register for classes. We offered student-led tours in both of our middle schools in February and March, and those were on Tuesdays and Thursdays during the school days, so that our families could come in and experience our schools in action and, you know, see student learning taking place. We hosted our Explore Middle School nights in March and saw over 700 people between our 2 buildings. So staff from Metcalfe also attended both of those events and were a friendly, familiar face for our students making this transition. Also in March, we brought all middle school staff together for a middle school summit where we immersed ourselves in the middle school mindset. We built community amongst all of the middle school staff, and we engaged in professional development around how we can effectively and equitably meet the needs of our middle learners.
So after March, due to a distant learning, we had to modify those plans a little bit, but we still have been working hard to make new connections. On the next slide, it'll show a little bit about what our next steps were then. So this spring, we reached out to the incoming students. Both Angie and I have created welcome videos from the principals and staff, and we've emailed those out, sent those through Schoology, all of those sorts of things, so students are watching those. With those videos, we also sent surveys to get feedback from students. For instance, we asked our incoming sixth graders what questions had they had about middle school, and some of the questions were about schedules, lockers, and what about this swimming that we hear about. So then I had some teachers, sixth grade teachers, create a video answering those questions to help introduce the students to the teachers too. And of course, we sent surveys to our sixth and seventh graders, and we asked them, what do you like about your current middle school and hope to see at your new school? Interestingly enough, overwhelmingly, students' responses were that the best thing about their middle school was their teacher. Family Connections has also been part of our work. For instance, recently at Nicollet, they had a chess club meeting to make future plans for the transition. And the communication department is helping us to create a virtual tour, which is narrated by some of our current students. We've also been working to welcome our new staff members. Both Angie and I had one-on-one meetings with each new staff member. That was 39 meetings for Angie at Nicollet. I had about 15. And then as we put together our new building leadership teams, we made sure to balance those with new staff too. Both middle schools have also been doing what we call a virtual staff lounge on Friday, and that's during the lunchtime. We do Zooms and we invite our new staff members to come have lunch at their new school. As we look towards summer, we have lots of ideas that will depend on the Minnesota Department of Health guidelines. But if possible, we'd really like to have some visits to the school in July and August. Also, summer will be a time that our web teachers will really be working with our web leaders to get them prepared to lead our sixth graders. They're already planning Zoom meetings and possible small gatherings to prepare those students. And then as we look at the first day of school, we're excited that we're just going to have our sixth graders and web leaders and hopefully make that transition to sixth grade much smoother and more successful to our students. Our seventh and eighth grade teams will also incorporate some of the web activities that first week so that those new to our schools feel welcomed and that they belong. And then as we move into summer, obviously things are always changing, as we kind of know with COVID-19. We're just going to keep finding new ways to connect with our students.
All right, thank you. And as Erica noted, I think a big theme for a lot of the presentation that we're doing now, the one we'll talk about with graduation, and a theme for all of our work as leaders over the course of the last quarter has been adaptability and making the best decisions with the information that we have. And that information has at times changed by the minute. And so there have our decisions and our planning and other kinds of things. And as noted on the front end, what I wanted to do was give a little bit of an idea of the things that our teams had been working on at the sites that were identified for closure. Again, a lot of that is about how do we honor history and provide some positive closure through those sites. And what you'll see here through all of them is kind of a twofold approach: the original plan and some of the things that they had been looking to do, and some of the adjustments that they have made and continue to make. And as somebody had mentioned before, I think it was John Bonneville who mentioned how teachers are very resourceful and are very creative. And there's a lot of crowdsourcing of ideas that go on with social media. And as ideas come up that fit within parameters of social distancing and our health guidelines, we're certainly looking to give the room for our teams to be able to be creative and continue to adapt and evolve with those. But looking at MW Savage, certainly their original plan had talked about an enhanced track and field day, a fifth grade send-off, books for every student and a yearbook, a school dance, and a last day of school assembly. As they've adjusted, you've already heard a little bit about the parade ideas. They've talked both about the contents of a parade, like you just saw the pictures of kind of a driving through the neighborhoods, as well as some of what they've called a reverse parade, which is kind of like enhancing some of that curbside drop-off with some kind of a socially distant, acceptable way for teachers to display signs and wave to students as they're coming through to let them know that, certainly our teachers are missing our students. And our students at MW Savage talking about having special cards for kids with books and yearbooks towards the end is still part of their planning. At Sioux Trail, their original plan had an entire Sioux Trail celebration week, talking about the history of Sioux Trail. They talked about activities like a lip dub video, and if you're familiar with that, it's students lip syncing throughout the course of a particular song and going from student to student or staff to staff. Community walk, all school service project and assembly, a picnic and a reception for both community members as well as student and staff alumni, as well as a community kind of a big photo. Kind of that post-COVID-19, certainly they have also engaged in that driving parade, handed out goodie bags via a curbside pickup system. End of year video, John mentioned the videos, and I know there was already one video out there from Sioux Trail's custodian Mark, is it Glendy, who created a video. So if board members hadn't seen that, certainly prod Superintendent Battle to send you a copy of it, quite neat. Yearbook handout, weekly fun pride activities, all a part of that. They are also looking, if possible, and there's a lot of those if possible kinds of scenarios. If possible, the PTO is hoping to host something possibly at a later time of some kind of gathering that they had initially talked about for that closure for Sioux Trail. It just all depends on what the guidelines are for the state of Minnesota, the Department of Health. And then Metcalfe, original plan had talked about a community and a grade level barbecue, carnival field day, drama, all school dance, and a staff student talent show. More recently, they are also talking about some of those variations of parades, some giveaway kind of memento type items. They've had kind of a Metcalfe fun fact, kind of a history type thing they've been working on. And again, also working creatively with their PTO for other possible opportunities to celebrate things in the current environment. Before we conclude, or as we conclude, I just want to say a special thanks certainly to the 4 principals that have joined us tonight, but to all of our principals. They've worked really hard and have been very creative, and they've continued to commit to this commitment and making this a positive transition when I know that the entire team is really busy. It's a very different world educating through distant learning and supporting teachers and families and students in this kind of environment. So again, I really appreciate that. I know that they're very committed to developing those relationships with our families. And I think when they do get that chance, as we talked about on the front end, we got amazing teachers and caring people that are ready to serve our families as they join their new sites. And Cheryl, that concludes this presentation.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for joining us and giving us some insights into everything that all of you have been working on. I'll open it up for questions and comments to board members. If you use the raise the hand feature.
Looks like the hand raising thing may have been disabled. So.
Okay. Director Schatz? Dr. Hume, did you have a question as well? Oh, okay. So we'll go Director Schatz first. Sorry.
So first, just thank you to everyone who has put so much time and effort into this. It has been nothing but disruption these last couple of months, and I'm immensely grateful for all the work that's been put into this, recognizing that not only is this a difficult transition for us at the end of the school year, but also with these 3 schools that are closing, for which we very much wish had the opportunity to celebrate and honor everything that has gone on not only this year, but in years past. So thank you to everybody who have put so much time and effort into this. I know the community, teachers, as staff and students, parents, everyone is really grateful for the time that you've put into this. So that's my comments, Chair Alt.
Thank you very much. Director Chester?
Yeah, I also want to thank everyone for the thoughtfulness that has gone into planning for the distance learning, for all the ways that the teachers and the schools are expressing their care for the students during this time. I know My daughter just loved the parade going through our neighborhood for Ron, and watching the all school assembly. That was quite amazing too. That was all virtual, and so despite all of the uncertainty, there is that high level of engagement that I know that my students are feeling, and so I'm incredibly grateful for all the thoughtfulness and the opportunities that all of the staff are doing to think outside of the box to engage with the students as well as the families.
Thank you very much, Director Chester. Any other comments or questions? Director Hallwigger.
Okay, I'm gonna try to do this without crying. As one of the parents of kids who will be at a different site next year, the open houses were so valuable, and I appreciate every second of time that everybody put into it. My older daughter got all of her questions answered, and we got to look at the school, and I think it really it eased a lot of our anxieties and actually got them quite excited for the upcoming year, which, you know, is hard because you look forward to summer. But I mean, everybody's worked so hard, and just as a parent, it's been amazing seeing everybody come together and putting their best foot forward. So I just want to thank everybody so much.
Great. Thank you very much. Couldn't say it better. Thank you all, fellow board members, principals, Assistant Superintendent Gersich. Really appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you.
With that, we will stay with Assistant Superintendent Gersich. We'll be receiving a report about graduation ceremonies for the class of 2020.
And Chair Alt, are we seeing the graduation ceremonies front slide there? Just want to make sure. Great, thank you. Thank you again. And then this time on behalf of our principals and myself, again, I appreciate the opportunity to address the board with this team. This is kind of a mixed emotions presentation. On one hand, I'm really proud of the work that our administrators have done with their teams at their sites to work hard to find a way to celebrate the class of 2020 and to make graduation special. The difficult side is this is not something that as an educator we want to be doing. Graduation is the culmination of what we do and why we're here. And it's such a special symbolic thing to talk about. Doing it in a format that is different than what we're used to is a challenging and difficult conversation. And I know that that's most difficult for our students who had a vision of what their graduation ceremonies were going to be like. And here tonight, we're talking about alternatives to that program. And again, I want to stress, I'm absolutely delighted with the efforts of our team on this. It's just a really difficult kind of presentation to do under those circumstances, because it's just not how we operate. It's not how as a school we like to celebrate, again, the culmination of education in the public space and what we do. One of the things I miss the most about, having been out of education for a short period of time. Just from a general overview of the presentation though, talking a little bit first just about the why. Why are we here and why is there a need to adjust? And this is something that we've been talking about for quite some time, but as we'll progress through the slides, you'll notice that some of the ambiguity was taken away from MD with a pretty direct statement about what this is going to look like. But from the beginning of social distancing, this has been on the horizon, and we've been discussing and planning, and again, kudos to the team as a part of their hard work on that. And then what we will do is kind of share what some of those general plans are for celebrating the graduating classes for 2020. Principal Dave Helke will be joining to talk about specifically what they've been doing at Burnsville High School, Principal Kelly Ron will talk about what's been going on at Burnsville Alternative School. And then I did get a chance to meet with both Jennifer Middendorf and Jason Sellers about what they're planning for the BEST and ABE ceremonies respectively. And we'll give you an opportunity. I will present kind of their thoughts on what they're thinking on those as well. From a perspective of the why, here's something that had been communicated, whether it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, from Governor Walz and the state of Minnesota about kind of how they're looking at restrictions and social distancing and stay-at-home orders or Stay Safe Minnesota, or however those things are termed, is that three-way balance between public health, social distancing, and well-being. And as they look at this slide, and it's titled "From the State of Minnesota, Factors to Consider When Loosening Restrictions," certainly it was a good visual that talked about, as we were internally having a conversation, factors to consider. We're talking about a large gathering like a commencement ceremony for graduation. And again, realizing that societal well-being would be to conduct a ceremony like graduation, a celebration of the graduates in a large group setting, and yet does that conflict with the social distancing expectations, groups of 10 or more people, as well as the general public health. Another visual that's been used by the state of Minnesota, the turning of the dials, certainly a large graduation ceremony, thinking of Burnsville High School, a large group of people in a stadium. Certainly when you look at the social settings, that dial is all the way over to sporting venues and concerts, things that just really are not deemed as safe by our Department of Health. And it really does make that traditional looking celebration, whether it's in the Mraz Center or on the football field, unrealistic in this time. And again, we've been talking about that for quite some time and trying to develop alternatives. As recently as last Friday, it really was clear that those alternatives were the option. That was what we really had. Was the statement was pretty straightforward and clear: indoor graduation and ceremonies held outside in stadiums and football fields are not permitted. Again, it really made it pretty clear, and it was about the most direct feedback, instructions, and guidance we've been given by the state of Minnesota and the Department of Education throughout this entire process. And so when you look at that and we just look at our general parameters, things we've been talking about from the beginning, and again, that previous slide just came into fruition from last Friday, throughout the process, ensuring that we're monitoring the Department of Education and the Department of Health parameters and stay within our planning. We want to make this special for the class of 2020 and really, as the principals will talk about, taking a look at those critical components of the traditional graduation and trying to maintain those as much as possible, as well as looking for those other creative ideas that can help make this special and unique under the circumstances. Certainly the principals will talk a little bit about the need to utilize feedback and ideas from staff and students, really having a holistic approach and bringing in those outside ideas. And of course, as I said in the previous presentation, maintaining flexibility throughout. As we get new information, we will make decisions as best we can based on the information that we have. It has been the theme of everything we've been doing in District 191 since mid-March, when all of these realities came through. And even when I talk about flexibility, earlier today, we were having conversations about additional things we could be doing, and I expect that those will continue right up until graduation itself actually happens. At this time, I would like to invite Principal Dave Halke. He's going to talk us through a little bit about the conversations process and what graduation planning is looking like at Burnsville High School. And then again, Kelly Ron from Burnsville Alternative High School will discuss a little bit about what's going on at BOS.
Good evening. First of all, can you hear me?
Yes,
perfect. Sir. I'm not sure what's going on with my camera. I've never not had my camera work, so I apologize for that. But good evening, Chair Alt. Good evening, Superintendent Battle and members of the Board of Education. First of all, I would have never thought that I'd be here presenting and sharing plans for a alternate graduation at high school, especially a alternate graduation where we can't bring people together due to a pandemic. There's been a lot of talk about adaptability and change, and I would say that truly has been the mantra of the last couple of months. I'd also be remiss if I didn't acknowledge just the mixed emotions that our seniors are feeling and experiencing. I've had a chance to talk with some of them over the course of the last couple of months, and truly there's just a lot of emotions, and rightly so. I mean, their year came to a very abrupt end. They've missed out on some activities and events, and obviously they haven't been able to be together as they close out their educational career. The other thing, though, I do know is that in this class especially, they have a lot of resolve, and I know that they are not going to let themselves be defined by their circumstances, and they really are going to look at being defined by their accomplishments. So that's what brings us to graduation. That's what graduation is all about. It's a ceremony to celebrate their accomplishments and a ceremony to honor what they've done. So as you can see on this slide, we started talking about graduation back at the beginning of April. It is the most important thing for seniors, and it is the biggest celebration that we do as school districts. And so really at the beginning of April, I had a meeting with our senior class officers. Graduation was the #1 topic, and that really was more just talking about what could be the possibilities. We didn't really know what was going to happen at that point in time, but it was important to have the conversation and to at least talk about all that could happen or could be. Shortly after that, I started meeting with Teresa Muser, our graduation coordinator, and Abby Katz-Merrick, my administrative assistant, and then Brian. And again, a lot of the conversations were just around, hypothetically thinking about what are the things we could do if we're not able to bring everybody together to celebrate in a traditional sense. Also, had shared with staff, had another meeting with SCOs, met with, used Zoom and met with senior leaders from some of our leadership groups, Black Student Union, Burnsville Strong, Seoul Student Council, and had a chance to just hear from students some of the things that they really felt were important about graduation. We continued that with a senior class meeting. I had a little over 200 seniors join us for a Zoom webinar. And after that, they had a chance to complete a survey. And that really helped us as we were moving forward with our planning, because it highlighted for us some of what students felt were the key components of a ceremony. And that was the wearing of the cap and gown, being able to capture that cap and gown moment. They also talked a lot about the individual recognition, hearing their name and being recognized individually. And then obviously ways that they could celebrate together with each other, with families and friends. We also on that survey asked how likely they would be to come and participate in a future event in early August that, would be kind of a graduation gathering, senior send-off. And we had close to 80% had said they would likely or very likely come back for that. Throughout all of these conversations, one thing did become quite apparent is that having graduation at our high school, and when the weather's nice, having it in Pate Stadium means a lot to our kids and families. They really, they want to be in that atmosphere of Pate Stadium. So a lot of good conversations. What's not on this table is throughout this whole period around the Metro as part of our Minnesota State Association of Secondary School Principals. And 80% of our conversations have been around celebrating the class of 2020 and what are you going to do for graduation? How are you going to handle graduation? Also in there, you see that we did have some initial consults with Burnsville Community Television, with Jeff Andrews, who helps us out as our Mraz Center coordinator. I've said all along that I can do a lot in terms of the concepts and a lot in terms of the ideas, but I am not the technical expert. So we wanted to make sure what we were thinking about was something that actually would be possible. So that brought us to early May, where we were able to put together the recommendations that include what I'm going to share here on the next slide. So we kind of broke things into 3 areas. First of all, pre-graduation activities that actually go right up to when we would do the virtual ceremony, the actual virtual commencement, and then looking out to that future event, some type of a senior send-off. And so pre-graduation, we always have had the luxury of students being able to come and get their caps and gowns in school. So it's always exciting when that day comes where they're able to pick those up. What we're going to do this year is we're going to put together a graduation package, and that will include their cap and gown. It will also include their diploma cover. We are going to create official programs that look just like every other ceremony that we've done. And those will be distributed on Thursday, May 28th, so that week after Memorial Day. And we actually are also going to have that distribution separate from where they drop off their Chromebooks and things, just to provide a bit of specialness to the occasion. And then they'll have all the elements that they need. We wanted to give them that diploma cover so that obviously there can be a lot of photos and things that they can take even prior to the ceremony. And then we're working on developing a pre-ceremony. So much like a pre-game for a sporting event, we'd like to put together an approximately 30-minute, really would be a picture and video tribute type event that would stream out. And the idea would be is that we would pull in pictures, reminiscent of this past year. And then we're also looking at getting some video congratulatory statements from other folks, possibly including alumni and other local people. So that would play prior to the virtual commencement. And then we felt it was really important to have the commencement on the day and at the time that we had planned, a way to really celebrate and help our seniors provide closure to the end of the year and be excited about the fact that they just completed school. So we will be streaming the ceremony virtual on June 5th at 6 p.m. I know it will stream on this live YouTube channel, and I also know there's a couple of other channels that it's going to be streaming on. The ceremony will include the traditional reading of graduate names by teacher name readers. We have the seniors vote on teachers like they do every year. And so the teachers will be dressed in their graduation robes, and they will be reading the names as student pictures will be going across the screen. This was one of those things that was called out specifically in the survey. And I know that hearing feedback from other individuals or reading feedback in some other virtual ceremonies, the personal touch makes a big difference as opposed to just a bunch of us as adults putting together some speeches congratulating the class. So we wanted to keep the ceremony as true to what we do as possible. The Minnesota Chamber Orchestra released a rendition of Pomp and Circumstance that is absolutely beautiful, that we can use without having to worry about copyright. And so that will be playing at the beginning as we fade into the welcome. We will have student speakers, and Superintendent Battle will be speaking. And as I said, we'll also be recognizing each of our students. And then we're planning on coordinating that with some type of community recognition that same evening. And that planning is still in the works, and there's lots of different ideas that are starting to come together, but we felt it was important that there'd be something that could, just community-wide, bring the community together and celebrate our graduates. And then the future event seniors talked about, that's really going to be dependent on a lot of guidance from the state. But if we can do it, we would be looking at something in early August that we would love to host in Pate Stadium to give the seniors one more chance to come together. So it's, it has been quite the ride, but I did tell the seniors during the senior class meeting, we are all willing to put 150 to 200% into this because they deserve the recognition, and we want to honor them like all the classes that have come before them. And then the only thing I'll add here in conclusion is just a public thank you to Teresa Muser, to Abby Katzmarek, to Aaron Tinklenberg and his team, and Jeff Andrews, Burnsville Community Television, and many other people in the background that are helping put this together. So thank you so much for allowing me to share this evening.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Yes. I'm Kelly Ron, the principal at Burnsville Alternative High School. And for our graduation ceremony, we also had a committee that's been meeting since early April to discuss our plans for creating a personalized graduation ceremony for our graduates. We have a staff committee. We also did a student survey. And then this week, we were lucky to speak to most of our graduates as we delivered lawn signs to them outside their residences. And they came out to receive their graduation yard sign, and we were able to get a picture of them for our graduation ceremony to personalize our ceremony more. So we too are going to have a virtual commencement, much like BHS. It will be similar to the ceremony we've had in the past with student speakers. Those of us speaking will be dressed in gowns, cap and gowns. We'll have district administration. Some of our teachers are speaking. We have 4 student speakers. We have an alumni speaker that will be coming in to tape their part of the ceremony as well. We will also be reading names and showing student pictures as their names are read for our ceremony. Our ceremony will be broadcast at the time that our graduation was scheduled on June 4th at 5 p.m. and then will also be sent to families. And the district communication team will be helping us be able to do that. For presenting diplomas, when students pick up their caps and gowns from BAS at the end of May, we are not giving them their diploma cover at that time. One of the things that we heard from students, both in our survey as well as in person, was that they really wanted us to see them in their cap and gown, and they wanted to see us as part of their graduation ceremony. So we are developing a drive-through presentation. On this presentation here on this slide, it had mentioned a parade format to students' homes. And we still may do that if some students elect that, and that is their choice for us. However, when we delivered our yard sign to our 67 graduates, we realized that that is not feasible to complete in one day. So we are moving towards creating a drive-through type of format at BAS, following social distancing. And then at that time, whatever the number of allowed staff participants from BAS will be, that's how many adults we would have there. If it's 10 or if the number goes up by June 4th, we would obviously follow those guidelines. We would have staggered times for students as well of when they would come to receive their package. And for us, that would mean their diploma cover. They would have a photo that we would give them that we've created and framed for them with teacher messages on the back, individualized for each student, that we will give them at the time of their graduation. And then a class t-shirt we would give them at that time as well. And then much like Dave had just mentioned for BHS, we will be creating a separate video that we will send to students after the ceremony that kind of documents highlights of the drive-through ceremony, as well as some snapshots throughout the year, much like the BAS ceremony typically shows. If those of you have been to our graduation before, that slideshow will be sent to students along with some photos from our drive-through diploma distribution. And all in all, our students are very excited about having a situation that involves seeing their teachers. It was definitely a highlight to hear from them and hear how excited they are to graduate. And although many of them are not happy about the circumstances of having to have some of it be virtual, they are just overjoyed with their graduation and their experience at our school. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly and Dave. Moving on to the Burnsville Egan Savage Transition or BEST program. They do have 16 graduates from that program, and what they are planning is kind of a curbside, similar to what Kelly had just alluded to. There are some guidelines where they can allow some of these in-person contacts. They will all be taking precautions when they do these curbside kinds of things, wearing masks or gloves, socially distancing, allowing things to be passed on tables versus person to person, very similar to what you might see in some of our pickup lines for serving meals, even though in this situation, what they're going to be looking to do is they'll have things kind of outlined with chalk arrows and measured out so that the graduates can exit their vehicle, pick up their diplomas, a t-shirt, have an opportunity for a photograph where they're holding up their diploma. Again, very good to monitor and acknowledge that they're going to be going through some social distancing guidelines and following those department health expectations, and then creating a video for students with various messages. And this is an opportunity where they are asking, and whatever the process might look like to gather volunteers or others, that if there's messages that can be delivered as a part of that video from Dr. Battle, from members of the school board to our best group, I know that they would certainly look forward to that. And I know that's a part two of Dave talking about his ceremony and the various pieces of the virtual environments. There's definitely an opportunity here as we're looking for alumni and community leaders and board members who may want to offer those messages of congratulations to the class of 2020, personalize that opportunity. Please know that we'd like to work through those opportunities with you for those who may be interested, or Chair Alt, however the group may want to decide or divide or otherwise. Certainly we're open to ideas, but with videos, we have an opportunity to piece a lot of things together. The other one thing I wanted to note about the BEST transition program and the BEST ceremony is just to acknowledge that most, if not all, of our students did previously come through our go through a commencement ceremony, a traditional commencement ceremony earlier. BEST program is a transition program for our students ages 18 to 21. So they have come through and previously gone through a commencement with their other graduating class. So this is an additional ceremony for our BEST students. ABE also has a typical graduation. They are planning a virtual commencement as well. They're going to have graduates picking up a packet, would include the cap and gown, GED certificates, a photo opportunity, and then they will also be creating, again, that virtual ceremony with the celebration, the pictures, and some spoken words. They will have theirs streamed. I believe that's the same date and time as the original ABE ceremony, Thursday, June 4th at 6 o'clock. And again, they will be reading the names very similar to Dave's description of how they were going to do things at BHS as well. And just as we conclude here, certainly a major note of thanks to all of our committed staff and teams. Both Kelly and Dave, as they were describing it, made it clear they've got a lot of people working on these. Their committees, chairs, teachers, secretaries, whomever, are really helping to make this special for the class and doing a lot of work to try to be creative, to find ways to recognize these students, making the best of an unprecedented situation. And again, unprecedented is a word that I feel like is almost, I've become numb to it because we hear it so often during the pandemic, but it's the only thing that really fits. There's really never been anything we've had to do like this before when it comes to our graduation ceremonies. We will continue to monitor and follow that guidance from the Department of Health. We're going to be flexible because that's, again, the theme of what we've done. And as new information comes forward, Kelly articulated this before. They're currently looking at a design of 10 people to try to hand out those diplomas or do other things. If that's expanded, their group can expand, provided they follow the social distancing guidelines at that moment. And as was alluded to throughout the process, working with city officials to recognize graduates in as many unique ways as we possibly can. Also want to just say a note of thanks to all of our students, our families. I know that they are also looking for creative ways out in the community to support our school district, our teachers, our graduates during this time. There's just been a lot of support across the board as we've worked through this process. And that concludes our report.
Great, thank you very much. Board members, questions or comments?
Gerald, I have a question.
Director Courier, yes.
What is our role and responsibility in the ceremonies that have been described?
Brian, would you like to answer that? I believe we may participate. We may attend the virtual graduations.
Attending the virtual graduations, and as noted before, if there is a desire to record a message, and I think that could be, Dave, I'm not sure if you had a limit to that or open to all board members, to offer those words that we would record. We could have that done in a studio, or board members could record those messages on their own, and those could be inserted to those various virtual ceremonies as well. So it would be an opportunity on behalf of the board, and I guess I would defer if there's a desire to open that up, or if there are designees that would want to split out those various ceremonies to offer those words on behalf of the board. I think there's an opportunity for flexibility here. This is just not your normal environment.
And I do know that the communications department has been working with Dr. Battle and myself as well in terms of making statements. In terms of the request for board member comments with best, just to let fellow board members know, I will coordinate with Dr. Battle, and most likely someone in the communications department you can reach out to somebody in the communications department and we'll figure that out. Any other questions? Comments? I wanted to reiterate heartfelt thanks. This is a tremendous time, and I know we're all heartbroken for the fact that what our traditions typically are with graduation, that we're going to have to shift. But the silver lining is that we are able to do that shift and honor and celebrate our graduates in each of the different programs. I'd also like to, in particular, thank Principal Helke for being so proactive in taking a lead on discussing graduation, recognizing that, even before we knew where we might land, that this really is the major milestone, and we need to get that right for our graduates. So thank you for being so thoughtful in your conversations with families and with students. It's very reassuring to know that we've been able to land in a place where our grads feel they are getting the recognition and celebration that they deserve. So with that, thank you all. Appreciate the presentations. And next, we are moving to Dr. Battle, Stacy Sovine, Executive Director of Human Resources, and Lisa Ryder, Executive Director of Business Services. We're going to receive a report about COVID-19 and the potential financial impact as we know it today.
Thank you, Chair Alt and directors of the board. So tonight, the three of us will give a update with information known so far about the financial impact of the offering the major task. We have been delivering education through distance learning, serving meals to the community, children 18 and under, as well as providing childcare for our first responders and healthcare workers. To give you an overview of tonight's presentation, we will start off with legislative matters. That would be both Minnesota legislature as well as our governor and federal legislation. These are fluent situations. As you know, the Minnesota legislative session ends May 18th. Many of the bills proposed have not been adopted, and so this is a very fluid situation. Next, we're going to discuss some school district funds impacted. Fiscal year 2019-20 as we close out this year. We'll give you a little bit of information about summer school, and just today, Governor Walz gave an executive order about summer session, and MDE provided more information. The staff and we are still reading through those documents. And then fiscal year, going into fiscal year 2020-21. And then Executive Director Sovine will have some human resource topics. So I'll start us off with the Minnesota budget and proposed legislation. Last week, the Minnesota Managing Budget Office provided an updated budget projection. It shows that, unfortunately, we are now facing a deficit of $2.426 billion for the current biennial. This is almost a $4 billion change compared to the February forecast. Revenues are expected to be $3.611 billion lower, and spending is expected to be $391 million higher. Commissioner Franz did note that the state does have a reserve of $2.359 available to help mitigate the projected impact. And in addition, the state will be receiving over $2 billion in federal COVID-19 relief aid, and I'll discuss that a little bit later. Governor Walz has directed all of his commissioners to explore any and all options to address this budget shortfall. And so staff and I will be staying tuned, as I'm sure you and other citizens of Minnesota will also be staying tuned. Both the House and Senate are advancing legislation to address the impact of COVID through their policy bills. Right now, there's no new funding proposed. They're just making sure that we get the funding promised and that we also have some flexibility in current funding sources. Moving on, first, the Senate Finance Committee has heard Bill 4494, and that's to establish broadband access grant program. As you know, one of the barriers for our distance learning has been our access across the state of Minnesota. There is inequity. I do want to, before I move on to the next slide, really highlight our two organizations that are really helping superintendents as well as school board members learn about all of this funding, and they keep us up to date. And that's the Association of Metropolitan School Districts, 41 districts of which we're a member, as well as the Minnesota School Boards Association. And so the information today really comes from those two organizations. Moving on to the next slide. The Senate is also looking at 4257 to provide funding from concurrent enrollment, teacher training. So really that money will help with our teachers. As you know, in this new time of distance learning, we hope some of that will help for the new reality for our teachers. And also establishing innovation zones. And so I think we have created just our amazing staff, instructional staff, educational assistants. It's innovative what we've done. And so I wanted to include this because it does permit schools to design new ways to personalize learning and empower teachers. The next legislation is coming from our Minnesota House on the next slides. So the House Ways and Means Committee did pass 4415 to require school districts to retain and pay hourly employees and address the finance formula glitches. The bill does not make an exception for budget-based layoffs for programs without dedicated funding streams, nor does it make up for the loss of fee revenue that districts are experiencing, including 191. Realizing our nutrition and community education funds, and Executive Director Ryder will give you more information about that. Also looking at the bill 4542, it allows for some formula adjustments for distance learning, some technical corrections, and routine adjustments that our finance people will have much more information about those, the nuances of those adjustments. The next slide, we have 3 bills, and I did include the links because it's ever evolving, it's ever changing. And yet for your information, it really addresses our internet access across the state, as well as learning grants for schools. Now I'm going to move on to the federal legislation. The federal, the CARES Act included 2 funds. First, the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund. And I'll tell you a little bit about what the federal government, the purposes and the flexibility that they have given to governors, including our Governor Walz. So the first, Congress set aside $3 billion and directed states to allocate 90% to school districts based on the state's Title I. So this is connected to our Title I allocation and counts. And so Governor Walz has extreme latitude in the distribution of the funds. And Governor Walz did want input from school districts. So AMSD sent out a 2020 member survey to ask about our priorities for this federal funds for our state. And I gave a link to the survey results that have been published, but I do want to share a couple of highlights. So 37 out of the 41 member districts completed the survey. The superintendents highlighted the financial concerns about costs associated with ensuring school health and safety, loss of fee revenue, and securing technology and internet access for students and families. The priorities from those 37 member districts were childcare, technology, because access is inequitable. We were better poised than other districts because of our 2015 levy. And so we did have devices and we did have funds, whereas several other districts did not even have the devices to give to their students. Third priority was summer school programming, and fourth was professional development. And so just want to reiterate, the legislative session for Minnesota is scheduled to end May 18th. Not sure if we will have a special session or not. The situation is fluid, and then we hope to have final information to present to the board in June. And so at this time, I'll turn it over to Executive Director Stacy Sobine.
Good evening, Chair Alt, Dr. Battle, members of the board. The areas that I'm going to be addressing deals with one of the earlier relief packages that came out with the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. And really, if I were to kind of put this into a quick little phrase, it's really to mitigate the impact of leaves and layoffs. And it's, you know, there's for the leaves portion, there's two high-level types of leaves that have been made available to employees: an emergency paid sick leave, and then the expanded FMLA, or Family and Medical Leave Act. And I'm not going to get into the weeds on these because there are so many different levels and situations in which employees would need to kind of see if they fall into one of the multiple categories as to whether they're eligible for these. The first one is more of a short-term self-quarantine type of effect, where up to 2 weeks would be granted with a maximum daily amount of $511 or $5,100 over 2 weeks. This has, again, a number of different scenarios in which the employee would have to qualify for. And this goes beyond the liability that the district already has for sick leave that we provide through many of our negotiated agreements with our unions. So both of these are outside of the normal negotiated leave packages that are available to our employees. So with the reasoning behind that is the act really was written in a manner so that folks didn't have to try to make a decision on spreading the virus or taking care of themselves or family members, or risking bringing the virus back home to family members that are vulnerable, or working. So it was meant to help mitigate that choice a little bit for folks. The second one was an expanded FMLA. And again, that's up to 12 weeks, where $200 daily or $10,000. Now, the difference with this one is the first 2 weeks of the FMLA are not paid for under this provision. But the rest of it is picked up under this. FMLA typically for employees would be able to use their available sick leave, vacation, any other type of leave that they might have towards the 12 weeks. Again, this is outside money, and it isn't impacting their leave bank. They can supplement, or they can use part of it to extend beyond the 12 weeks. Up to this point, we've had 47 employees that actually have accessed one of these two leave options for anywhere between 3 to 47 days. and roughly about $72,000 has been the cost for that programming. Again, that is not our typical leave cost. This is above, that's related to COVID. The second area is the layoffs. To this point, the district has not either furloughed or laid any of our employees off. We have done everything that we can to honor the requirements that were given under the executive order, that we continue to provide meals for our families and our community and for the students, so that because we're a primary source for many of our students as far as the meals is through the district. So we continued that, as well as the child care for first responders and district employees and distance learning. Some districts took different paths or different ways of interpreting the fee-based programs, tried to eliminate those staff and then use other staff within their district. And we chose the professionals that were trained and certified in the areas to do the jobs in which they were certified to do. And ironically, it happened quite frequently where HR directors were saying, hey, are you having problems having your EAs fulfill the responsibility for childcare? You know, how are you folks filling childcare? We laid all of our folks off. Well, we didn't lay our people off. We used who we had that was trained to do those positions. And I'm not, everybody is making decisions based on the information that they have, their local contracts, their local budgets, and we're all in this together in a sense of trying to make the best decision with the information that we have at this point in time. There is no right or wrong. It's just what we have at this point in time. So briefly, I kind of went over the difference. What is the difference between a furlough and a layoff? Furlough would be for a short amount of time, usually very temporary. A layoff is some of the things that we did with our unrequested leaves of absence, releasing our probationary teachers in the upcoming weeks when we release some of our non-licensed staff. Those would be layoffs. Furloughs would be a shutdown for 2 weeks, reducing hours for a temporary amount of time with the expectation that you're bringing those employees back once your work is available again. And they have some different rules following behind that. Next slide, please. Just also to let you know, up to this point, we have about 140 to 150 applicants that have applied to the Bureau of Unemployment Insurance. Roughly 2/3 of that amount are former employees that no longer actually work for the district, but we are impacted to pick up a portion of their unemployment, even if the next employer releases them or lets them go. So unemployment has tails. Wherever somebody works, everyone's picking up a portion of that going forward. So roughly about 35 to 40 of the folks, somewhere in that area, are current employees. And again, we haven't laid anybody off. So these are folks that have taken it upon themselves to apply for unemployment. And the way the Bureau at this point is acting is they're just granting. They're granting the unemployment. They're wanting to make sure that people have what they need at this point in time, and they'll figure everything out on the backside. And we have, as well as many other districts, have been trying to contact the Bureau, following through with what we're obligated to do and saying, hey, this person is still working, we're appealing this decision. So we'll follow the process, we'll do what we're obligated to do, and we'll let the Bureau decide on the back end how they're going to handle it. We have notified the union leads that we haven't laid anybody off. And if folks are doing this, one of the things that we have heard back is any money that has been given, more than likely will be expected to be returned. So, you know, folks they need to be careful as far as moving forward with this if it doesn't really apply to them. So, and that really are the two different areas that we're working on right now. The numbers it's kind of slowing down a little bit, again, as the school year is moving towards winding down. Close to 2/3 of our employee population we'll be moving towards our summer break. So we will have, close to 100 days to kind of figure out what next year is going to look like and have a little bit better information for that. And we'll see how this fall plays out as far as where we are with the virus. I believe this is for you, Lisa.
Good evening, Chair Alt, Dr. Battle, Board Directors. As we take a look at the impact to our school district for COVID-19, we first needed to take an assessment of exactly what would we anticipate would be the factors for each of the various different operating funds that we would expect to see an impact. So as we took a look at the general fund, we were seeing that there was technology, hardware, software, internet connectivity for families. That was clearly going to be a need greater than what we may have anticipated previously. Additionally, there's a loss of rental income of space, which became evident immediately as we closed down our rental of facilities. The targeted services, knowing that we were no longer able to continue that program for the time period it was planned and that it was closed, we will not see as much revenue in the area of targeted services as we had anticipated. And the requirement also within the executive orders to continue paying our bus contractors. So in the general fund, these are the key points that we knew right away we needed to be paying attention to. As we took a look at the food service fund, we knew that meals were being provided to the community under 19 years of age. And it was a different number of meals that we found ourselves serving based upon what we had previously been serving our families and students with. The continued need to cover our salary and benefits of employees who are within the food and nutrition program, but on leave, or those that are working on the food distribution. We had a risk of losing employees that we may need at a later date, and the unknown length of period of time that this would be continuing. The utilization of our current inventory of food that we had in our coolers and our freezers, and making sure that the meals that had been planned on our calendars for a monthly meal service now needing to be looking different, and yet how could we use that inventory to create those meals for families and not have wasted food? And the negative balances on our family meal accounts. All of those factors we know we from the beginning needed to be keeping an eye on as well. For the Community Education Fund, Community Services Fund, we have required cancellation of all programs, classes, and activities that occurred immediately upon COVID becoming a factor for us. The loss of revenue from fee-based programming. We had a need to provide that childcare at no charge during the school day, being required in the executive order, not knowing how long that would continue or the need from day to day. So we had registrations that took place for many of our healthcare providers, but we're finding we're the backup. So they don't always necessarily actually bring their children to us either. So there's the question every day as to how many will show. Then we have our risk of losing employees that we may need if we were to lay them off. And as you heard from Director Sovine, we have not done that. And the unknown length of time. So in knowing those factors of those 3 different operating funds for the fiscal year 1920, we took an extensive review of exactly what it is that we have happening on a line item basis. And so the next few slides show a few points across these same funds that I want to make note of. We are assuming there are no federal reimbursement funds for general fund activities. We anticipate, assuming that there would be no federal reimbursement funds, we would anticipate a declined revenue compared to budgeted. Now, we do know that there are federal funds coming our way. What we don't know is exactly what our allocation will be. So this is just a question in the air. At this point in time when I review things, we know that we have a loss of revenue at this moment. We are assuming there will be savings related to substitute costs, and the amount is still being calculated. At this point in time, we are receiving the invoices for the month of April, which is our first full month of not utilizing substitutes. And so that's really kind of our benchmark indicator of what we could anticipate for the month of April, as far as May too, and for that period of June that we would normally have maybe had subs in the first week. So therefore you can see where that's still kind of in the air, because we just don't know those bills. They haven't all been fully submitted yet. In March, we had to communicate with our bus transportation providers. A 10% discount for transportation was negotiated with them, as our current contract actually didn't have us paying them anything. But due to the executive order requiring that we needed to continue paying, we needed to negotiate that process. We did take note of the fact that if there were more than 8 routes per day that we were asking them to help us with, that there would then be the need to pay them actual costs for anything above 8 routes. That covers their cost of fuel and operation of those actual vehicles versus the 10% discount, which assumed that wasn't the case. As we take a look at the general fund, there is a link here to your document, and I'll make this a little larger here for you. So as of May 8th, in taking a look at things, we know this much about our general fund. I'm running down this as if I'm looking at an income statement. So our revenues, let's start there. Our tax revenues, we know we're expecting to see a delay. What this means for us is both Dakota County and Scott County notified us the fact that they were not going to enforce any penalties among our community members should they be paying their taxes for May 15th late. They were going to have till July 15th, I believe, to make that payment to the counties. And during that period of time, with that delay by them, that meant then our payments from the counties would also be delayed. So for us, this is more of a cash flow matter. And we know in the end, there may be more delinquent taxes we're recording at the end of the fiscal year, but the reality is we're still going to have that full amount to record as revenue. And the cash flow piece is going to be our challenge to make sure that we've got that covered. So we've been taking a look at our cash flow analysis as we go, trying to make sure that that can be received. Most districts in the state have debt payments that are due February and August. And so with a debt payment of August 1st, receiving our tax payment July 31st doesn't work very well for us. So we have already reached out to the counties to inquire of them being able to give us our final payment at least a few days early to allow for the 3-day credit enhancement program to be paid in advance of the due date, August 1st. As you take a look at state revenues, we are expecting to continue those, see those continue as normal. We do expect the amount of the general education funds generated from targeted services will be less, as I mentioned earlier, but it's a little too soon for us to determine exactly how many ADMs we're talking about. So that's in the process, as is normal, of being calculated, but it's an end of the year calculation that takes place with that finalizing of that data through Mars. With regard to the state revenues, I'll talk further about that in the future about what a change in that metering might look like. At this point for this fiscal year, we're not anticipating any metering change. For federal revenues, we will align the revenue to the amount that we actually expend. So we need to be cognizant of not having too much of a more than a 15% carryover. At the same time, it would not be surprising that if we underspent, we would then also see lesser revenue, but we would be matching that. Does that make sense to everyone? All right, so then not knowing exactly how those expenditures are going to finalize, it's a little soon for me to give you any exact numbers, but that's something we're keeping an eye on. For our local revenue, this is where we see our miscellaneous fees and donations. So this is interest income, this is participation fees for activities, athletics, miscellaneous revenue donations coming in through revenue. Those are all down right now compared to budget by $645,000. That's a total amount as of May 8th. As we take a look now to our expenditures within the general fund, there were some clear avenues of savings that seem to be coming through, and we're going to keep an eye on these to kind of finalize these. At this point in time, the number for substitute costs looks to be approximately at least $300,000 savings. Utility costs is approximately $100,000 savings that we are hoping that we can see come through. And then we know that we would likely have a larger amount unspent for prior year committed funds. Keep in mind, this is the year that any carryovers we saw coming in from last fiscal year, we did not distribute them to our school sites. And in addition, we have been very mindful of our budget situation and had not spent a lot of those unspent dollars from before. Anticipating those could help us in bringing up that fund balance at the end of this fiscal year, assisting us as we looked at projected fund balances. Now we're just going to have to determine how much of those savings can be applied into the future or how much must be used for the impacts of COVID-19. Keeping in mind that the board approved a revised budget for FY20, anticipating $1,079,990 spend down of fund balance pre-COVID-19. Going back to our presentation. Moving on to the food service fund, we anticipate the reimbursement rate for meals served during this period of COVID will cover our costs of staff actively serving those meals. It may not cover all the costs related to staff using their earned sick leave and the supply costs for developing or creating those meals. We are waiting to see about that. There's a lot of discussion in our conversations with peers regarding the revenue that would normally have been spent statewide. They say will be reallocated to schools serving meals. So what we don't know is how much is that really going to be? Will we see much more of an increase there in the revenue to help with those costs or not? Taking a look at the link that is attached for food service, and I'm going to make this larger as well for you. This here is a draft also as of May 8th. And while we are not collecting revenues from our families for daily meals, we are collecting from the federal summer food program, which is what we're functioning under. And that it does allow revenue again to cover the costs of our food service staff preparing the food and the supervision of its distribution. There are additional cost factors of the additional staff, given the fact that we must be social distancing and being very cognizant of the health requirements. And so therefore there's additional staff time, materials, and to be able to just deliver those meals curbside as well as via the buses to the sites in a safe manner. And those are significant costs to us. There's also a great deal of discussion at this point across the state with regard to what expenditures they're going to continue to allow us to use food service fund revenue for. There's some discussion from the federal government that we are not able to cover our costs of those staff members who are not actively serving the meals. So if they're using their leave, they're saying we can't charge that to food service at this moment. And we are actively advocating for that not to be the case. We believe that fund balance that exists in food service exists because of the program and how it's run and how it's been funded over the years. And the purpose of a fund balance is to assist when times are lean. We believe that those dollars should be available to cover the costs of the very same food service people who earned that leave within their fund. So that's something that's up for debate, and we're waiting for guidance from the federal government. MDE is understanding our concern, and they don't necessarily disagree. They just feel their hands are tied at this moment. So given that the categories of expenditures under discussion include costs of approximately $400,000 to $1 million in range. So the challenge will be how much of it can be coded under Fund 2 and how much must go to the general fund for coverage. Additionally, we have not done this in the past, as we have not considered any to date of our negative food service meal account balances as being uncollectible. Law says that once you do determine that amount to be uncollectible, it must move to the general fund and be covered there. And it cannot be covered by food service fund balance. So that is something that this year we will also need to address. Keeping in mind, the board approved a revised budget for fiscal year 20, anticipating $142,755 spend down of fund balance pre-COVID-19. We began the year with an available food service fund balance as of June 30, 2019 of $1,014,178. Moving back to the presentation and covering next our community service fund and the financial impacts. We anticipate the greatest deficit in the community services fund is due to our loss of revenue and ongoing salary and benefit costs to fulfill the governor's order to serve our community childcare needs without charging a fee during the school day. We will likely require a significant fund transfer from the general fund to be determined yet prior to the completion of the fiscal year 20 audited financials. So taking a look at the link for community service, and I'll make this a little larger as well. This too is a draft as of May 8th and only includes those actual bills paid to date. The largest and most significant impact is the inability to collect revenues for services that began right away March 16th, approximately $1 million at this point in time. This loss of revenue exists while we continue to incur the full cost of our staff working within community services, providing the child care required under the governor's executive order. Additional costs were incurred for materials for the EDGE program, which has been canceled for the summer. These costs are largely for admission to field trip locations, which are an expenditure at this time, but will be used in the next year as extensions have all been granted at this time for their use in the next year. Without all of the costs determined yet, the best estimate at this point in time is that we can anticipate a need to cover a range of $1 million to $1.5 million of lost revenue and additional costs at year end. Keeping in mind, the board approved a revised budget FY20, the current year, anticipating a $111,295 increase to fund balance pre-COVID-19. The available community service fund balance as of June 30, 2019 is zero. The fund balance of $319,842 is available and restricted to school readiness programming from previous years. So in summary of these three, you will see that there's about a $1.4 million to a $2.5 million of excess expenditures over revenues. And it's a very high level estimate at this point in time, with many assumptions being used as of May 8th, 2020. Our debt service fund, we can anticipate the delay in receipt of our May distributions, as I mentioned, of levy funds for both Dakota and Scott County. And although we may have additional delinquent dollars that might be calculated in the receivables at the end of the year, we're still going to be recording 100% of our revenue that's earned. Does that make sense? Even though we may not receive it by June 30. We have already discussed with Scott County and the desire to receive those funds earlier, as I mentioned, and we'll be doing the same with Dakota County. Like I said earlier, it's really more about that cash flow. Now, our summer school. We are working through guidance that is starting to be delivered now regarding what that needs to look like. And we strongly want to provide a summer school for our students. We know our families are interested in this, and we want to be able to do something to continue serving our students, as we feel as though they just need that connection. So given that we anticipate both the 9-12 credit recovery programming and the 8th grade summer STEM academy programming that will likely be approved to run this summer. We're just working on what it needs to look like for the K-7 summer targeted services, as at this moment, there's guidance now coming out. We just need to kind of work through that. I do know that Jason Sellers has been actively advocating for this authorization and working really closely with people at MDE to make sure that they're clear on what it is that we would need to see. If the K-7 is approved, we know that it will be a distance learning format, maybe a hybrid at this point. We'll have to kind of see how that goes, which, you know, leaves some concern from a financial perspective, because that likely means that our amount of seat time that we're able to actually count towards that ADM is far more limited. And you can't necessarily fund a program as well as you could if it were in person. And so that's going to be a challenge for us, but I have every confidence that, you know, the people we have involved in designing our programming, they understand this and they know how that works. And so it's just at the top of our minds, and we're working through that process. I want to now switch gears to the future. So for fiscal year 2021 and beyond, we anticipate, we've had lots of conversations. I want to make mention of the fact that this year, for example, or this month, excuse me, MASBO has had a virtual conference. We normally have a 3-day conference in May. It didn't take place this year. So this month we have a month-long virtual conference going on, which has been really ideal in the fact that we have had a number of different sessions that have been spread out across the month, giving us the opportunity for time to absorb, ask questions, and get answers at a subsequent session. So it's been very, very helpful for all of us. Most of the conversation that's been held generates more questions. So we are fortunate to have the opportunity to make that happen. And I can't, when we go on these Zoom calls and you see 150 people attending, it's quite amazing that, you know, that's how many people are engaged in these conversations on a regular basis. So given that we all have been talking about what does this mean for the future, and so these are a few of the points. We do anticipate the impact will last at least 2 years, as many of these things that require levy adjustments, it will take 2 years for us to see that come through. An example is unemployment costs. We're going to pay those unemployment costs now upfront, and we're going to only see those funds come from our taxpayers down the road in the form of an increase in the levy. Known unemployment costs, okay, I said that. Concerning with the FY21 funding formulas, there's a question, will they reduce the 2% increase that is in current statute? We do not believe they will make that action. It's possible, but we don't believe it will happen. So at this point in time, we're just crossing our fingers on that one and hoping it doesn't. We do anticipate beginning in FY21, however, that they will prorate our funding. This happened some years back, and when that does occur, this is what it means to us. The state is cash basis. School districts are modified accrual basis. So although we won't receive our full 90% and 10% the next year as we currently do, and say we saw something like a 60-40 split, it would mean we would receive 60% of our funding. We would have to record 100% of that funding as earned in that year, but we won't see the cash until the following year for that 40%. So therefore, it's really a cash flow matter. And I anticipate we will need to then gear up for some opportunities to either do a short-term borrowing scenario and or state or tax aid anticipation certificates. With that, that means additional interest costs that we can anticipate for those years, and we need to be planning for that. Additionally, we have discussed the fact that increased funding for fiscal year 22 or fiscal year 23, given the projection that we've seen from the state, we're all assuming it will be 0% increase on the formula. So most people are modifying their future adjustments in their models and using a 0% increase. One thing I want to make mention of for the current year, at this point in time, we're still actively negotiating certain contracts within our own groups. So everything that you've heard me say about our current status for the operating funds is dependent upon the finalization of where all of those contract negotiations fully land and what those actual costs are compared to the dollars we had included in the budget. And so at this point in time, it's just too soon for me to know that for sure. I have been kind of keeping track of which ones have been settled and when is it the retro pay is actually paid out to kind of figure that out. But it's just too soon for me to give you any numbers at that point. So I just want to make mention of that as well. And that concludes our report.
Great. Thank you all very much for pulling together this report. Board members, questions, comments? Director Schatz.
Yeah, I don't have a question, I guess. There's just too many unknowns for me to have, very specific questions. And at least I know how speculation is not your favorite thing to do when this is concerned. So, but I will say I appreciate, the work and the thought that's gone into it, from everyone's perspective. And I think we have done, I think our sound financial practices from the last, few years and, beyond, are putting us in a good position now to not only be able to forecast some of this, but as much as possible, but have put us in a good position to understand where we are at financially, at least from that standpoint. And I actually had as far as even like the Chromebooks, the tech piece of that, for our students, what we were able to provide for our students. I actually had a comment from a board member from another school district today who said how impressed she was with 191 and our ability to roll out that technology so quickly for distance learning to all of our students. And that was nice to hear. This is a board member who admires a lot about what is happening in 191 in a lot of different levels, but specifically about that, our ability to respond to this distance learning crisis with the ability to help our students as much as possible. So thank you to everybody for the work that's gone into it and for the past work that clearly is setting us up for some good, a good foundation for the next couple of years of uncertainty.
Thank you, Director Schatz. Director Miller.
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to echo a little bit of what Darcy was saying there. I appreciate Dr. Battle and Lisa very much the work that's gone into this. There is obviously too much to speculate on right now that it would be appropriate to ask a lot of detailed questions, but I think that just, for me, the biggest pieces that I've tried to speak about and reiterate is that I don't want to get caught with some large surprises. So I appreciate that you're staying on top of it and you're keeping an eye on it. That's the critical piece. Challenging conversations are hard to have, and potentially in the future, bad news is going to be hard to deliver. But if you have let us know that that's a possibility, and that's the best you can do, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Miller. Any other comments or questions?
Chair Alt,
Director
I'm asking this question of all of us, even the administrators. I've tried to follow the governor's comments, but the community service fund that's in trouble due to having to cover the child care, has there been any hints on how school districts may be reimbursed for that coverage, for that child care coverage? Does anyone know?
So,
Dr. Battle.
yes, so Director Courier, it's related to that federal legislation. And so the governor has discretion. And so that's related to the AMSD survey. And so number one was the child care. So there are many districts like us that are have lost the revenue, but we've had the expenditures. So that's what we're hoping will get some relief, but as Executive Director Ryder said, we don't know how much, the portion. Lisa, I don't know if you have anything to add from MASBO.
No, I'm hearing pretty much what you've said, Jess. Waiting to see.
So it's truly unknown at this point.
I would say there's been quite a bit of advocacy from those in the community services fund, you know, the directors across the state. So I have no doubt MDE fully understands our situations. I think there was some hope that general fund balances would be able to cover those differences. But I think that's something that we're all just going to continue advocating for, the fact that, similar to like if you have a storm damage in your home, you hope just to be made whole by insurance. I mean, I think no one's looking for, you know, give us extra money. We're just looking to be held whole, right? And to bring us back to where we were. But that's the question of whether there's that possibility, because we don't have insurance to cover this.
Thank you.
One other note, it's not only K-12, the federal relief funds is for post-secondary also. So I haven't heard much from higher ed about what they're asking for.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And I also know through our advocacy groups, AMSD and Minnesota School Board Association and MASA, their advocates are talking with legislators and advocating on our behalf expressly on this topic. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. Board members, any other comments or questions? Director Chester.
Yep. So there you go. For going to the layoffs and the furloughs and with Human Resources Director Sovine, I know that we haven't, as a district, taken any action in terms of doing any extended reductions or layoffs. Have we asked? So one part of the reason I was thinking about it, and I just thought of it now, is have any staff had to have their hours reduced at all, or of those that are current staff that are seeking unemployment, are any of those part-time staff? Because I believe that if there's a reduction in hours, people can go to collect unemployment for the hours that they're being reduced.
Yeah, the folks that were committed to, as far as either full-time employment or well, typically 25 hours or more. If we have a commitment to those folks that will impact their benefits, we have not reduced their hours. For our casual employees, I say casual and it's a very loose term, our part-time employees that may pick up anywhere from 5 to 20 hours a week, we're using them to round out our needs. But somebody that may be accustomed to getting 15 hours a week may be closer to 10, just as the needs go. But it wouldn't be our full-time employees, our steady employees that are, especially those who are benefit eligible. It would be more of our casual, week-to-week scheduled employees. And again, that would just be a reduction in the hours in which they're scheduled. It wasn't any official furlough or layoff.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none. I had a couple. Going back to Darcy's and Eric's comments on the levy, I was speaking with a parent earlier this week, and she said, now that we're in distance learning, I feel like I could write a letter to the editor every single week thanking our community for supporting that tech levy back in 2015, that we really are in a great position. And she just told me that, the experience that her children are having in distance learning certainly doesn't mimic the classroom, but she's very satisfied with their experience. So yeah, we can't thank our community enough. Lisa, specifically questions on that shift that you were talking about, the potential shift. Um, I remember there being a comment from the county about escrow tax payments still going through, that those would not be forgiven. Do we know, number one, can we confirm that that escrow payments are expected to be received, and do we know what portion of our, our funds come from those, so that we at least know the balance of what will or won't be paid?
Um, so we do know that our escrow payments that are scheduled will be paid on time, May 15th. Your question of what percentage for Dakota County and for Scott County of our proceeds are escrowed, I have yet to gather that information, but I can get that from each county and share that out with you. The concern related to that, however, is really more about the fall impact, because that may change for a lot of people with regard to that which is escrowed come fall. And so the real concern out there is more about the impact this may have on us all in the fall, just because, there's an opportunity for either those who can't afford or whatever to take place, and there could be appeals to tax returns or tax statements and all of that which goes into it. And so those which are escrowed now may not necessarily be escrowed in the fall.
And I would say, given that, I wouldn't ask you to go find that information, because it's, again, another unknown.
Right.
And just for clarification, you had talked about summer school funding. Am I understanding you correctly when you say that if it's if we have, part of the student's time is at home, distance learning, and the other part is in one of our schools, we only are reimbursed for that time in the schools?
So I have not yet followed through all the guidance that has just come out in the last day or two.
Got it.
What I can say is, prior to that, this is what we were hearing. If you were doing synchronous learning face to face, those minutes count minute for minute, right? For that seat time. But our current distance learning program is being funded regardless of how many minutes the teacher is actually face to face with students. We're basically getting the full ADM, right? That is not allowable in the summer learning program, with synchronous learning being the only way that you can gain those minutes. So if I spend 15 minutes with a student, that's all I can claim is 15 minutes. I can't use the 3 hours. Now, in our past summer program that we did this last summer, which was so beneficial for all of our students and so helpful to us financially, we went to a 7-hour a day program. And that really benefited students. We were able to do a very whole program, one that was academic as well as enrichment, and it worked really well. We were able to provide breakfast and lunch for students, and it was just positive all around. So the concern is now, knowing that we would need to do this distance, we're looking at most 3 hours, and then beyond that, we have yet to figure out what that might look like. And more concerning is the timing of how much will we actually be funded for it.
Makes sense. Well, knowing that the guidance just came out, we'll just look forward to hearing back on what everyone discovers.
Thank you.
And I guess just to wrap this up, it really, this board has become accustomed to having some tough discussions, challenging discussions around challenging finances, and together we have weathered the storm. And I think, looking ahead again at all of the unknowns, it may well be that we find ourselves in that same situation as a result of COVID come fall, and just be open to receiving whatever information and guidance we can from our staff. So thank you all very much. Appreciate all the time that went into this report. Let's see. Next, we are going to the superintendent's report with Dr. Battle.
Thank you, Chair Alt and members of the board. It's mid-May and we're 3 weeks away from the end of the school year. And I just want to spend a little bit of time telling you about some traditional end of the year celebrations that we will be continuing. So next week, Tuesday, May 19th, I will deliver State of the District Address and it will stream on YouTube starting at 1 p.m. On Wednesday, May 20th, Burnsville High School will host its Scholarship Night with Foundation 191. That will also stream on YouTube starting at 6 p.m. As you heard earlier about the graduation ceremonies for Burnsville High School, Burnsville Alternative High School, the Best Transition Program, and Adult Education programs, those will also be streamed. And those will all happen the week of June 1st, and details will be on our website. Lastly, two final events that are typically held to honor and celebrate staff members. First is the 191 Community of Excellence Awards ceremony, which was originally scheduled for April 7th. The winners for these awards have been announced and shared with the public. In fact, there was an excellent feature story in the Sun This Week newspaper about William Byrne Elementary Principal Muhammad Salim, who is this year's Leadership in Action Award winner, and they also mentioned some of the other staff winners. So we still plan to create a video to honor this year's winners. The exact details are yet to be determined. That concludes my report for tonight.
Thank you very much, Dr. Battle. I will ask, is our student representative here, Yoda Heat? I think she was.
Hello?
Hello, welcome.
Hello, okay. Okay. Thank you, Cheryl, Dr. Battle, and members of the board. Last Thursday, I met with Dr. Battle and Mr. Helke virtually to discuss the involvement of future board representatives, and here are some things that we came up with. We know that we want this opportunity to be available to all students, regardless if they are in any school leadership groups or not. But we thought it would be a good idea if each club or student group at the high school recommended or designated representatives so that we would have a wide variety of student voices from groups like BSU, Soul, Burnsville Strong, and many more. So it includes those in student groups, but is not limited to them. In this way, the future board rep would also be able to keep up with all the student-led events and activities that would be planned. Another thing that we thought was important was that this group should be structured like a club that meets regularly so that it works with student schedules and is in general an organized group. For the meetings, we were thinking that they should be once a month before the first board meeting where the report will be given so that the students of this group can converse and highlight what they think is important to be included in the report together, rather than one student writing on behalf of everyone. Also, Mr. Helke brought up the idea of this group possibly meeting with the high school administration about once a month or when necessary, so that there isn't any disconnect between student leadership and administration. An area that is a little more tricky to figure out is how we are going to involve the middle schoolers in this process so that all of you get to hear from students across the district and not just the high school. But this is something that we will continue to work on and plan with the help of our new school board rep. And in terms of the new school board rep, the student council executives and I met yesterday to discuss next year's executive board, and we've put in our recommendation for next year's school board representative and are now just waiting for it to be approved by the high school administration. So once that is done, I will let you all know, and that concludes my report. Thank you.
That's great, Yoda Heat. Thank you. I am going to make an exception. Board members, do you have any questions or comments for Yoda Heat? No. I just really appreciate hearing this progress, Yoda Heat, and just knowing that, thanks to you and your efforts, especially during this time, that we're going to reinvigorate this role and student input to the school board. So really nice work. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
And I will now open it up to board member reports, individual board member reports. I don't see any. All right, no board member reports. Turning to the consent agenda, although board action is required, it is generally unnecessary to hold discussion on these items. In the event a board member wishes to discuss an item, that item will be moved for separate consideration. Is there anything that board members would like to separate? Seeing none, I will take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Moved by Director Hume, second.
Second.
Seconded by Director Schatz. Ms. Kenny, would you please do the roll call vote?
Yes. Abigail Alt,
Aye.
Jen Hallwigger,
Aye.
Leslie Chester,
Aye.
Darcy Schatz,
Aye.
Dee Dee Courier,
Aye.
Scott Hume,
Aye.
Eric Miller.
Aye.
And the motion passes. Thank you. We have no new business on tonight's agenda, so I will declare us adjourned. We are going to adjourn to a Student Performance and Achievement Committee of the Whole with Amina Aftadal, Director of Curriculum, Instruction and Assessment, and Anna Rosselli, Assessment Coordinator. Presenters, do you need a minute or two before we begin?
No, I think we're ready to go. Taking the time to meet with us. Ms. Roselli and I are really pleased to be able to share this information about our district assessment plan. I think that as we go through and discuss in future meetings data that is indicating our students' progress, it really might be helpful for you to also know exactly what the comprehensive plan looks like and how